Hello, this is Amber Smith from 200fingersandtoes.com, and I welcome you to another episode of the Into Season Homeschool podcast, where we talk about the tips and tools and resources to help you create your best homeschooling experience yet. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about keeping our students organized. Now, it is the beginning of the homeschool year for some of us, and so we are looking for maybe some ways to keep our students accountable because maybe we just didn't quite do it last year, or maybe we're looking for ways to reorganize our area. I'm going to talk a little bit more in another episode about setting up our homeschool space, but right now we just want to focus on keeping our students organized and helping them help themselves. My biggest goal as a homeschooling parent is to help my students solve their own problems. And if we do see a problem, then we're going to find a way to solve it that helps us not continue in the same negative pattern. And that is just going to give you a much more peaceful homeschooling experience. Now, in our home, we had 10 students at one time. And so being organized helped us to manage a large amount of student to teacher ratio, also a large amount of just like product to human ratio. There's just a lot of things that accumulate when you're homeschooling, and each student has specific things that they need throughout the year, and maybe those vary from student to student. And so your younger students have things that they need, and your older students have things that are specific to maybe their curriculums. And oftentimes those younger students want to touch the things that belong to the older students. And so navigating ways to help our students stay organized is a great thing to start and think about being intentional even before school begins. So on that note, how do we help keep our kids organized? I believe this starts all the way back. Really, you can help your high school student be organized by helping your kindergartner be organized. The best way that you can help your child to develop a sense of organization and order is to help them when they are really young, to create that during their orderly life. So that means maybe minimizing the amount of things that they have to navigate and take care of. We were fortunate that we just decided that it was more important for us to have a place for the kids to play than individual locations for them to sleep. So often when the kids were young, they doubled up on bedrooms, and we had a triple bunk at one time that had a trundle bed. And so they were able to share all in one room so that we could dedicate one space in our house to a playroom. That meant that we didn't have to do a lot of cleaning of their bedrooms because all of the toys and things lived in the playroom. So that really helped to make me the person who helped them organize and keep that area orderly. So one of the ways that you can help your children to develop this habit of organization is by just minimizing the things that they have to navigate each day. Oftentimes when my kids could not clean their room, it's because it just hit a certain level of chaos that they just could not break down into a job. And so our job as a parent is to maybe break that giant job into several small tasks. So we would just make it fun. Even the playroom, when it was messy, I would say, find all the trash. And so they would go around and find any trash in the room. And I'd say, like, okay, now we had buckets for our toys. That was very intentional because that helped them categorize and organize and keep things put away. So I would hand them the bucket and say, like, here's the car bucket, go find all the cars. And they would put the cars away. And then here's the block bucket, go find all the blocks. So those may seem menial, but those are actually very important developmentally because your child is learning to categorize things. They're learning that specific items have a specific home and that those go in that location all the time. So also creating like some hinge points in your day. So we would have like cleanup time before we ate lunch, and everybody would just tidy up real quick and we'd make the room clean. And that was just part of our routine. So at the end of the night, before dinner, cleanup time, and we would just clean up the room. It made it easy because things all had a home. So if we had homeless items, we navigated where that was going to live. This bookshelf behind me actually used to have three more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It used to have, I think, 2 more sections on the end of it. And that actually held all of our toys. So I had totes that fit in those, the little square boxes that they have like at Target. And those would just tuck in those holes, or I had little Rubbermaid totes, and then like all their toys went in those holes. So like all the cars went here, all the food went here, all the whatever, and then our school books went on top, and any like reading books were on the bottom. So having a way to develop organization. My oldest is 23, and so this bookshelf has gone through many homeschooling reiterations. It was the playroom. The kids used to climb it to get their toys. Now, obviously, I sawed off 2 ends of it and now have it a bookshelf in my room. So you can navigate the things you need and make changes as your homeschool changes. So, one of the ways that we helped keep the kids organized with their personal items was for a while we were having a lot of like touching my things conflict. Like everybody was touching everybody else's toys. So, instead of it being like a huge problem for me, I just bought a toolbox for each child. And then I gave them their own toolbox, and I gave them their own padlock that just had like numbers. So it was really easy for them to remember. I didn't know their padlock codes, but I just gave them each a padlock with their toolbox. And then I said, whatever you don't want anybody to touch, I want you just to lock in the lockbox. And those are your personal items. And one thing that helped us was you could only own as much as fit in that, and it was a large, I mean, it was a big toolbox, so it was a decent size. It wasn't tiny. But that was the space for your personal items. There's 10 of us living in this home. Like there's just not, we're not going to create a whole bunch of extra space for stuff. And so it was really helpful for us to say your important things, if you don't want somebody to touch them, you need to put them in this container and lock them up. And so it made it not my responsibility as mom to take care of those problems. So again, transferring responsibility to your children when they're old enough to start handling that themselves is a great way to help them begin to understand the importance of being organized, the importance of taking care of things and following through. So if you can help them develop those skills in the younger years, then those kinds of things are going to transfer as they grow older. Now, in the high school years, I just had a Rubbermaid tote. So I've talked about them before. It was, I don't even know what size it is, but it was the size that I could put a notebook in the bottom of it. So if you go to the grocery store, or if you go to Walmart or wherever, and if you just grab a workbook that they sell, and if you can plop it in the bottom of that container, that's the right size. And I bought one for each child in the house. And that was their school bucket. And all of their workbooks and their reading books fit in that bucket. And then on top of that went their pencil box. And I bought them all the supplies they needed at the beginning of the year. I maybe bought a few extra like crayons and colored pencils. But for the most part, their stuff stayed in their box, and that stayed in their tote. And their tote came with them everywhere. So if we did school in the living room, the beauty of having this mobile container was that if we read on the couch, they could bring their buckets. And every morning I would say, bring your buckets, binders, and Bibles, and bring them, and we're going to read. So we'd start our day. But it made it very easy to be organized, because at the end of the day, everything went in their bucket. At the beginning of the day, everything was already in their bucket. And so it helped us to create this time where we could just begin our day without chaos. And I found it really frustrating to always be looking for items. And so, so having a location for their things to be was fantastic, and that really helped our homeschool, so they have their own personal buckets. Then for myself, I created a supply station. So I actually had an old TV cabinet, like a armoire that, you know, like the hotels, like you open it and the TV's inside. We don't use those anymore because all of our TVs are giant. And so we just reused that. Again, the reiteration, like we just recycle furniture over here because we couldn't buy stuff. And so we just remade the stuff we had into what we needed, because we're creative homeschoolers, and this is how we solve problems. And so you can hit a garage sale, you can hit a resale shop, be creative about the problems that you have and say like, hey, I can solve this problem in a creative and meaningful way. So I had an old TV armoire, and we just made that like the school station. And so all of the backup supplies were in that. All of my teaching textbooks, so anything that came with the teacher's textbook that I needed to refer to at some point in time during the school year, then I would keep those in there. I would keep maybe just like pencils, any documents that I regularly print, maybe some empty blank forms of our schedule. I would usually keep any like discipline forms or something that I want to fill out. Maybe something if we're having a problem and I want to keep a log of it. I share my accountability sheets, and that was one item that I would keep some copies of my accountability sheets so I could put that in my mom binder and just follow up on something if I needed to. I'll share more about those in the future. But if you're curious, that is part of my 30 days to homeschool reset, where sometimes you just need to step back and be like, we are just out of control and we really need to get organized. Like we're beyond a bucket. We need like a boot camp. And that's where the 30-day reset came, was helping parents like get their joy back in their homeschool by just like creating order and also creating some really clear accountability. Like who's following up on that? Whose responsibility is this item? Who's going to check and see that it's done? So that 30-day reset really goes this into depth. But this teacher's space, your homeschool parent space, is going to be the place where if they are missing something, they can go get a pencil sharpened. They can go get a replacement copy. They can find maybe the answer keys for math if they need to check something. So those are things where your homeschooling parent items are going to go. And then any backups of things that they may need throughout the school day, anything that's going to stall you out. I hate waiting. The only people who hate waiting more than me are my homeschooling kids. They won't tolerate it. I once answered a few math questions for an older child, and when I looked around the room, my son Ruben was gone. And I asked the kids, I'm like, where is Ruben? And they're like, I don't know. I thought maybe he went to the restroom. So I waited a few minutes. And then I looked out the window, and across the road in full snow gear is Ruben digging a snow fort. Like he did not have time to wait for me to tell people how to do math, because he had a life to live and he had a fort that needed to be built. And so if I'm not organized, I am going to lose my students' interest, and it's on me. Sometimes as parents, I can get frustrated with my kids because they didn't sit and wait. But also, if I refuse to be organized, if I refuse to come to school prepared every day, then really it's me that I should be frustrated with. And so when I talk about creating accountability, I will always talk about creating accountability for the parent first, because we are leaders of our homeschool. And if we aren't willing to put in the groundwork, we are not going to get the fruit that we want to see. And so if you want to see organized children, if you want to see people taking on the responsibility for their items for themselves, then you've got to lead. And that means you have to be intentional. You have to show up prepared, ready, on task with what they need for the day, and to anticipate their needs with the resources and tools that they're going to need as well. So I want you to be creative, but I want you to have a place for them to put their things away. Start creating a habit of creating order. Now, there may be places like they don't have to make their bed, or maybe their laundry's a mess, but that playroom, maybe your school room, at the end of the day, school is put away. If I see school out, I'm gonna be like, oh, are you still reading? Are you still doing social studies? Like, did you want to do an extra chapter? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, you left your book out. So I assume you want to do an extra chapter, and they're really quick to put that book away. So if you just create an expectation like, hey, when you're done, I want that put away so that I know we're finished. That can really help build this habit of being responsible and organized with our tools and materials. So I encourage you to look at your homeschooling space and say, like, am I helping or am I hurting in our organization? And how can I maybe create a better workflow? How can I better organize our tools and materials so they're accessible? And how can I help my students consolidate their items maybe into one location? If you're missing the backpack day, buy the kid a backpack. There is no reason why a homeschooler can't just tote around a backpack. If it makes them happy, if it makes them feel like they've got something fantastic and it zips and it shuts and it's kind of awesome because you don't have to look at all their stuff pouring out of anything. So I just encourage you to look for creative ways to solve the problems that you're looking at in building an organization. And if you have young ones, the power of play in organization is great. And so I encourage you, if you have a space in their room, get one of those bucket sorters and write the names of the specific items that go on it and help your child each day just tidy up and just throw those items in the bucket where they belong. And it'll help them build an understanding that specific items go together. And this habit of when I see this out, I can break down this larger task into smaller doable jobs. And that will help them think through the process of later much larger problems to solve as well. So, as you're thinking about organization, I would love your tips and ideas. If you have a great tool or product, in this blog post, I will share some links to the items that I use. I'll have some pictures of like the Rubbermaid tote. I also do have a blog post that is about your homeschooling spaces. And it shares quite a few of the tools that I use for organization and just keeping our day going, or homeschool helps that we have. So I encourage you to check that out as well. And I'll put the link in the blog post. But I thank you for joining me for another episode of the In Due Season Homeschool Podcast. I hope you were encouraged, and I will see you at the next episode. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.